Okay, so we are going to be building this tennis skirt with the pleated bottom on it, like we did in class. And we've learned some things since class, so please stay tuned for the end when we talk about the sewing of this garment. To begin with, we're going to take a measurement around our widest part of our hips to base our yoke section on. And I know from having done this in class that her hips, let's see, are about 36 and a half inches here. At the low hip, we want the widest point. And so we're going to create a rectangle that's about 40 inches around just to give her some extra room for playing tennis. This is a tennis skirt. Okay, so we're going to create a rectangle to begin with that has the dimensions of 40 inches wide. And I'm going to go a little bit lower than we did in class and make this about 10 inches long. That'll help pull the skirt into a better shape. Okay, so this is the basis of our yoke for this particular garment. Just waiting on my computer to finish thinking and move it into place here. Okay. I'm going to actually move our bra pieces over so they can stay out of our way. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to create our bit of elastic. And for that, I'm going to use a little bit stiffer fabric. So if you want to go over and select something like cotton twill and add that to your object browser, I'm going to use that to create my waistband because our stretchy fabrics are going to move out of place. So our quote unquote elastic is going to be the unstretched length, which is the length of our avatar's waist, minus a half an inch just to make it a little bit. Actually, I'm going to leave it at, I'm going to make it 27 just because in this case, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it sits down a little bit lower on our hips and doesn't gather quite so much. But since we've got a sturdy fabric, that'll help. That's not what I was hoping for. I was hoping for twill, so I'm going to go and select twill instead. There we are. Okay. So now I've got my elastic piece, quote unquote, and I need to create an offset. So I'm going to sew, because I'm going to sew that elastic into my yoke. So I'm going to select that line, right click, and offset as an internal line. I only want one of them, and I want that to be 1 inch, the same depth as my elastic. Okay, and now I'm going to sew those together. First, I'm going to sew the top edge of my elastic to the top edge of my yoke. And before I move on, I'm going to go over and change the sewing line type to turned in the property editor. And then I'm going to go in and sew the bottom part of my elastic to my internal line. And finally, I'm going to sew the sides of my elastic and the sides of my yoke to each other. Okay, now it's a matter of arranging this on our avatar. And so I do want to bring these around. I want to try to layer my elastic underneath. And so I can do that by highlighting it, right clicking, and go superimpose under. If you move it though, that's going to change the superimpose function. So keep that in mind. And then with both of these pieces highlighted and my arrangement points on, I'm going to place them on my avatar. And one thing I showed you is with them highlighted, you can actually make that cylinder less tight around her body by, again, while they're highlighted, go into the property editor, go way down to the bottom where it says arrangement. You can toggle or you can slide the offset to be a little bit wider so that it doesn't cut into her body, and that will make the simulation a little bit better. And so now I'm going to simulate this. And I'm pretty happy with how that looks. You can tug on it a little bit. But remember, this is a pretty high particle distance. The whole thing is 20. So again, everything's highlighted. I can go in and change my particle distance to 10, and we can see that that's going to improve the look of our gathers. Okay, so now we've got our yoke ready. Just going to tug on it a little bit and turn her around. Okay. So now for the calculating of our pleats. I want you to be thinking about your pleats, and I will write up a page because I know it's hard to follow along and use this as a guideline for making additional pleats. But the concept is, if you have your pleat spacing set, like I know, for instance, that I want to have, I'm going to make an annotation here. I want 20 pleats, 2 inches spaced from each other, or so rather, I have 20 pleats, and we need to figure out the spacing. Okay, the spacing would be the value of our yoke line, the yarn line to which you are sewing. That's the line it has to go to, is 40 inches. And if I want 20 pleats, that gives me a pleat spacing of 2 inches. Each pleat, in this case, I'm going to make 1 inch wide. So it's going to fold in 1 inch, and then the rest of the fold is 1 inch. And so our pleat intake for each pleat is 2 inches. So if you multiply 2 inches by the 20 I want to add, that gives us 40 additional inches that we need to add to the length of our original base length here. And so since this was 40, our new piece in the bottom is going to have to be 80 inches to accommodate 22-inch pleats. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to put 80 here, and I'm going to make the depth a little bit lower. I'm going to make this a 7-inch mini skirt there. A little bit different than what we did in class. It'll look more like a tennis skirt, I guess. And now I'm going to move this over so I can see how they compare. It should be twice as long. Okay, now if I want 20 pleats, I'm going to evenly distribute them, but I'm not going to add 20 lines here because this edge on my left is going to become a pleat unto itself. And so to distribute 19 pleats between that, I'm going to highlight both of my side seams, distribute internal line between segments, and I'm going to select 19 or add 19 in there. And you can see it distributes them evenly, but I'm going to end up having my pleat folds to the left of all these lines, and I want to make sure this initial pleat distance is 2 inches. So I'm going to leave the offset at 4 and change the distant to segment edge as 2. And I can see it shifts it over and gives me some additional space over here. That's okay. We'll deal with that in a second. So go ahead and make those changes and hit OK. With them highlighted, before you click anything else, right click on them again and offset as internal line. In this time, we're making the two segments that are required to fold the pleat. What we just placed were the pleat spacing. I'm going to have 2 offsets at 1 inch each. If your pleat depth was 1/2 inch, you would change this to that value, and it would give you 2 lines that are 1/2 inch from your initial pleat spacing line. But for this, we just want 1 inch. So it's given us that. And then I'm also going to select this line too and offset this as an internal line. And it's going to give me the spacing for that one. So this is a little different. This pleat, we made differently, but it's giving us the same spacing as the rest of them. So now we have 20 sets of 3 segment lines. In order for this to sew properly, and we'll know this down the road, I do need to highlight all of my new segment lines that I just made. Right click it, and then go to Extend, Trim, and Add Point to Pattern Outline. And that's going to give me segments in between each of those internal lines. Okay, now it's just time to make the pleats. So in your pleat tool, go to Pleats Fold, click on the outside of your line, hover, and double click on the other side. I'm not going to change anything, but do double check that your internal lines per pleat is set at 3. It'll cause all kinds of problems if you don't. And I'm going to hit OK. I should see the regular pattern of red, blue, maroon for each of my pleats there to know I've done it correctly. The next thing I'm going to do is sew our pleats. And I'm going to use a pleat sewing function, and I'm going to highlight my yoke line, and I'm going to highlight my pleats, and I should not wrap around the side of my pattern. If I do, I know I don't have the correct number of segments for each pleat. I need 3 segments per pleat. Now here's where it gets tricky, and I'm going to start a different video to do the simulation and to amend our sewing for this. So that's just creating the pleats and setting up the sew.